Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 10. Integrability Conditions. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are in Episode 8, The Pure Abstract Language. We are walking through Book 8.3, Abstract Syntax. We have already met the grammar rules, the constraint relations, and we have discovered that this language is closed under differentiation. No matter how many times we ask, how does this change? We always stay inside the same alphabet of derivatives of phi. That was closure. Today, we face an even more subtle question. Having a powerful alphabet and an infinite dictionary, J infinity phi, is not enough. Someone can hand us a bunch of derivative values and say, these all come from the same phi. How do we know they are telling the truth? How do we know there really is a single coherent field behind those numbers? Today, we discover the answer. We meet the integrability conditions. They are the rules that tell us when many local descriptions of change can be stitched back together into one smooth underlying story. They are the conditions that must hold if all those derivatives really belong to a single phi. 1. The jigsaw puzzle of change. Imagine someone drops a large box of puzzle pieces on the table in front of you. Thousands of small, beautifully printed fragments scatter everywhere. You are told, all of these pieces are from one picture. But there is no box lid, no reference image, nothing to check against. You begin to sort. You group blues together. Maybe they are from the sky. Greens might be from a forest. You try connecting some pieces. Many of them fit. Edges lock smoothly together. Colors and lines carry from one piece into the next. The picture begins to appear. Then you pick up another piece. This one is glossy, while the others are matte. Its cardboard is thicker. The color palette is different. No matter where you try it, it refuses to lock into place. The tabs and blanks are wrong. You realize, this piece is from another puzzle. It does not belong here. This is exactly the situation with derivatives. At a point, the full J infinity phi is like the complete set of puzzle pieces that truly come from one picture, the picture of phi's local behavior. But in practice, we rarely see the whole jet. We measure a few pieces, maybe omega from one instrument, k from another, some curvature estimate from a third. Each of these is one puzzle piece, one local description of change. Integrability conditions are the rules that tell us whether all these pieces actually fit together into one picture of phi, or whether some of them secretly belong to another puzzle. They ask, do these derivatives agree on a single underlying field, or are we mixing stories? 2. Linguistic role, the coherence test for paragraphs. Let us shift back to language for a moment. We said, derivatives are like words, constraint relations are like grammar rules, and closure under differentiation is the guarantee that we can keep generating new sentences in the same language. Integrability conditions are a different kind of rule. They are not about whether each individual sentence is grammatically correct. They are about whether all the sentences in a paragraph can belong to the same story. You can write, the king was wise and beloved by his people. That is grammatically fine. You can also write, the king was foolish and hated by everyone. That is also grammatically fine. But if you glue those two sentences into the same short story, pretending they describe the same person at the same time, something feels wrong. The story does not cohere. The same thing can happen with derivatives. You can have a perfectly fine time derivative pattern and a perfectly fine spatial derivative pattern, but put together, they might not be compatible with a single smooth phi. They may not be integrable into one field. Integrability conditions are the coherence test. They are the rules that say, yes, these descriptions of change can all be true at once about one underlying phi, or no, if these derivative values are correct, there is no way they came from one smooth field. Something is inconsistent. 3. Scientific essence. Can we reconstruct phi? Scientifically, integrability conditions ask a simple but profound question. Given a collection of derivative information, is there actually a function behind it that could have generated all of this? Think of a very simple case. Suppose someone tells you, the slope of my hill is 3 everywhere. If that is really the gradient of some height function, you should be able to integrate it and reconstruct the hill. In one dimension, a constant slope means a straight line. That is integrable. Now imagine you are in 2 dimensions. You are given slope east-west and slope north-south at each point. For there to really exist a smooth height function underneath, those slopes cannot be arbitrary. They must fit together so that when you walk around the block and integrate the slopes along a closed square, you end up back where you started with no contradiction. If going around the loop gives you a mismatch in height, your slopes were not integrable. No single smooth hill can have those gradients. This idea generalizes. When we measure omega, we are measuring slope in time of phi. When we measure k, we are measuring slope in space. When we measure curvature, we are measuring how those slopes change. Each of these is a partial description of phi. Integrability conditions are exactly the requirements that, when you follow these partial descriptions consistently around small loops in time and space, you do not run into contradictions. In more advanced language, integrability conditions ensure there exists a function whose derivatives match the values you have. Without them, you would be trying to reconstruct a story from quotes that cannot possibly come from the same book. 4. Time, space, and motion echoes of integrability. Let us see how this appears in our 3 echoes: time, space, and motion. In the time echo, imagine you know the frequency omega of some oscillation, and you also know its acceleration alpha, the rate at which that frequency is changing. If these belong to a single phi, then alpha must be the time derivative of omega. If you measure omega changing faster than alpha says it should, those two are not integrable. They cannot both be correct descriptions of one underlying time pattern. In the space echo, think again of a hillside. You can measure how steep it is as you go east-west, and also how steep it is as you go north-south. If these are true derivatives of a single height function, they must satisfy a compatibility condition. Their cross derivatives must match. Mathematically, that means the order in which you take derivatives in different directions should not matter. First east, then north, gives the same result as first north, then east. If that fails, the slopes are not integrable. There is no single hill that has those slopes everywhere. In the motion echo, waves give a very intuitive example. Suppose you have a wave pattern. You measure its temporal frequency omega, its spatial wave number k, and its speed of propagation v. If this really is a single wave built from a single phi pattern, you expect v to match the ratio omega over k, at least in a simple medium. If your measurements give you a triple that cannot satisfy any such relation, you are looking at inconsistent pieces. You cannot integrate them into one coherent wave description. In each echo, integrability conditions show up as simple statements. These measurements must stand in this relationship if they truly describe one thing. That is their scientific essence. V. Position in the master tree, checking if the crown belongs to one trunk. In the master tree picture, integrability does something interesting. It does not live on a single branch or twig. Instead, it looks at the entire crown of branches above a point and asks, could all of this have grown from one trunk? You can imagine walking up to a tree that looks suspicious. Its branches seem to twist in strange ways. Some branches look like oak, others like pine. You ask, is this really one organism? Or has someone grafted parts of different trees together? Integrability conditions are the mathematical version of that question. They inspect the pattern of derivatives of all orders and all directions and ask whether this whole branching structure could arise by repeatedly differentiating a single phi. If yes, the crown is integrable. It belongs to that trunk. If not, you're dealing with pieces from different trees mixed together. VIX, relations to neighbors, using grammar to test wholeness. Integrability conditions are deeply connected to the constraint relations we met earlier. Constraint relations tell us how derivatives must relate if phi is smooth and the language is to remain consistent. Integrability conditions use those same relations, but they apply them in loops, in combinations, and in cross-checks. For example, one very basic constraint says that for smooth fields, the order of partial derivatives does not matter. Time then space equals space then time. Integrability conditions take this rule and turn it into a test. They say, take the measured mixed derivatives in time and space. Do they satisfy this equality? If not, they cannot all come from a single smooth phi. In other words, integrability is what you get when you take the grammar rules seriously and ask whether a whole paragraph of derivative data respects them everywhere. It is grammar applied globally, not just locally. 7. Semantic meaning. Enforcing one underlying story. So what is the meaning of integrability in the story of reality? It is the condition that there really is one underlying story being told. The Holophase perspective says, behind all fields and forces, behind particles and waves, there is one phi whose changing patterns appear to us in many forms. But that is a claim, not a given. Integrability conditions are how that claim shows up in mathematics. They are the requirements that say, if you want all these different effects to come from one phi, their derivatives must fit together in these specific ways. They enforce wholeness. They protect us from fooling ourselves with fragmented descriptions that cannot belong to one substance. Whenever an integrability condition is applied, it is asking, are you still describing one field, or have you accidentally spliced together pieces of different realities? 8. Stability and falsifiability. Can everything really come from one phi? This leads directly to falsifiability. The Holophase program makes a bold statement. All physical phenomena in every domain are expressions of one field, phi. Integrability conditions are the sharp edge of that statement. They tell us how the claim could be wrong. Imagine a very ambitious experiment. A future laboratory measures an incredibly rich set of data about some extreme system, maybe the interior of a neutron star or an entangled quantum many-body state, or the early universe. From this data, we extract many local quantities, local oscillation frequencies, gradients, curvatures, correlation lengths, propagation speeds, and so on. We then attempt to interpret each of these as derivatives of some underlying phi. We assign omega, k, higher derivatives, mixed derivatives. When we are done, we have a candidate J infinity phi, a proposed local dictionary of how phi behaves there. Now we test integrability. We check the constraint relations, we test whether mixed derivatives match when taken in different orders. We see whether the various measured quantities can all be expressed as derivatives or combinations of derivatives of the same phi in a way that is globally consistent. If, after careful work, everything fits, the single substance hypothesis survives. We have found another domain where one phi can account for a rich variety of phenomena. If, however, we find stable, repeatable patterns that are fundamentally non-integrable, patterns of change that cannot be reconciled with any single smooth phi, then the claim that everything is phi has met its limit. Integrability has failed. We must then decide whether to extend the theory, perhaps allowing multiple fundamental fields, or to replace it. In this way, integrability conditions are not just abstract ideas. They are the concrete place where the Holophase vision meets experimental reality. Examples across scales. Let us look at a few analogies and physical cases where integrability plays a role. In electromagnetism, there is a famous condition. The magnetic field B must have zero divergence. In symbols, nabla.b equals 0. This is not a dynamical equation. It does not tell you how B evolves. Instead, it is an integrability condition. It says that if there really is a vector potential A such that B is the curl of A, then B must obey this constraint. If you ever measure the magnetic field whose divergence was non-zero, you would know that your assumption that B comes from such a potential had failed. In fluid dynamics, if a fluid flow is described by a velocity potential, then the vorticity must vanish. If you measure a swirling rotating flow with non-zero vorticity, you know it cannot be described globally as the gradient of a single scalar potential. Integrability has failed. You need a more general description. In everyday life, integrability appears in simpler forms. Consider planning a journey using a map. The distances and directions printed on the map must be mutually consistent. If the map says that town A is 10 kilometers east of town B, and town B is 10 kilometers north of town C, then going from C to A should give you a predictable diagonal distance. If the numbers on the map do not match that geometry, then the map is non-integrable. It cannot correspond to any real landscape. Or think about a person's biography assembled from scattered facts. She lived in Paris from 2010 to 2015. She worked in Tokyo full-time in 2012. Taken separately, each statement might sound fine. Put together, they conflict. No single life path can satisfy both at once, unless you add more context. The fragments fail an integrability test. They do not integrate into one coherent life story. X. Recognition skill. Feeling when pieces do not fit. Even without the math, your mind is very good at spotting failures of integrability. You feel it as confusion. You hear someone tell 3 facts about their day, and somehow the timing does not add up. You see a movie where a character teleports between locations without enough time passing. You read a news story with details that conflict. In each case, you are picking up on integrability violations. The derivatives of the story, its changes in place, time, and emotion, do not fit into one continuous narrative. You can train this skill gently by asking, whenever you face a complex system, if all these observations are true, can I imagine a single underlying process that produces them? Or do they pull in different directions, hinting at multiple separate processes that have been mixed together? From the Holophase perspective, this is the intuitive side of integrability conditions. It is your mind trying to decide whether it is looking at the unfolding of one phi-like pattern or at the collision of several different stories. 11. Return to phi, testing the unity of the tapestry. As we close this part, let us return to the beginning. We started with one field, phi, the holophase, a continuous cyclic movement that, through its derivatives, gives rise to time, space, and motion together. We built an infinite dictionary of change, J infinity phi. We discovered grammar rules linking derivatives, and we saw that the language is closed under differentiation. Integrability conditions now stand at the gate between pure language and reality. They are the tests that any proposed phi description of the world must pass if it is to be taken seriously as a description of one underlying field. They are the mathematical expression of the idea that reality is not a pile of unrelated facts, but a single tapestry. In the holophase vision, integrability conditions are not optional extras. They are the guardians of unity. They ensure that when we say all of this is one field appearing in many ways, we are making a statement that can be checked, challenged, and, if necessary, overturned. Zooming out, remember that everything we have talked about is still just one field, phi, and its derivatives, the single language the universe uses to write every story. In Episode 8, we are not yet solving the stories themselves. We are still learning the deep structure of the language, its alphabet, its dictionary, its grammar, its closure, and now its integrability. In the next step of our journey, we will look at how this abstract grammar organizes itself into layers, forming a formal grammar hierarchy. We will see how simple local rules scale up into global patterns and how the language of phi becomes capable of describing the rich physics we observe. For now, as you move through your life, notice moments of coherence and incoherence. Notice when details fit together as if they were written by one author, and when they clash as if pages from different books have been shuffled together. Those intuitions are your lived experience of integrability and its breakdown. They are small human mirrors of a profound question. Does this all come from one underlying story or not? 12. Loops, paths, and coming back home. There is another way to feel what integrability means, one that is close to the body. Picture yourself walking around your neighborhood. You leave your front door, turn left, walk 2 blocks, turn right, walk 1 block, turn right again, walk 2 blocks, and finally turn right once more to come back along your own street. You have walked in a rectangle, a little loop in space. If your map is correct, if distances and directions are internally consistent, you end your walk exactly where you started. You have closed the loop. Now imagine a strange world. You follow the same turns and steps, but when you reach the last corner, your front door is missing. You end up half a street away. Something is wrong with the geometry or with your map. The loop does not close. The path refuses to form one coherent space. Integrability conditions are the mathematical version of insisting that such loops close properly. They say that if you integrate little steps of change around a small loop in time or space, you should end up back where you started if you really are describing one smooth phi. If loops fail to close, you are warned that something new is happening, a defect, a twist, a hidden charge in the fabric. In the Holophase framework, such defects are not mistakes, they are important. They signal places where the simple picture of one smooth phase needs refinement. But even then, integrability conditions help us classify those breakdowns. They tell us whether a defect is allowed, how it carries information, and how it fits into the larger tapestry. 13. Smoothness, creases, and topological surprises. You can also picture integrability using the image of smoothness and creases. Imagine holding a sheet of paper. As long as the paper is uncreased, you can describe its shape everywhere by gentle slopes and curvatures. All the local gradients fit together. They are integrable into one global surface. Now fold the paper sharply. A crease appears. On each side of the crease, the paper is still smooth. You can still describe each side with slopes and curvatures. But right at the crease, something new happens. The two sides meet at a sharp angle. You cannot describe that corner by any single smooth surface. You need at least 2 patches. Integrability conditions tell you where such creases are allowed and how they behave. In a sense, a topological defect in phi is like a cosmic crease. Around it, if you walk a loop and try to integrate all your derivative information, you do not come back with everything matching perfectly. There is a leftover twist. That leftover twist is a sign that phi's story has a non-trivial topology at that point. One of the tasks of the Holophase program is to show that even these surprises can be expressed in phase language. The breakdown of simple integrability becomes a new kind of encoded information, winding numbers, charges, and defects that carry meaning in the fabric of reality. 14. Integrability and freedom. It is important to notice that integrability conditions do not force phi to tell one particular story. They do not lock the universe into a single script. They simply require that whatever story is told be internally consistent with coming from one underlying field. Think of music. The rules of harmony and rhythm do not tell a composer which melody they must write. They simply rule out combinations of notes that clash beyond recognition. Within those constraints, there is enormous freedom, almost infinite variety. Integrability does the same for phi. It leaves a vast landscape of possible worlds open, each one a different pattern of derivatives, a different arrangement of echoes in time, space, and motion. But in each admissible world, The patterns can be traced back to one coherent phase field. The language stays honest to its own premise. As you move through later episodes, when we start to talk about concrete physical equations, you will see integrability hiding in the background. An equation like this curl must vanish or that divergence must be zero is not just a technical aside. It is a whisper that says these patterns of change still come from one phi. 15. Standing at the threshold of formal grammar. With integrability conditions, we have reached a deep threshold in episode 8. We now know that phi gives us an alphabet of derivatives, that those derivatives organize into a hierarchy, that the hierarchy at a point forms a complete dictionary J infinity phi, that grammar appears as constraint relations between derivatives, that the language is closed under differentiation, and that integrability conditions test whether a whole bundle of derivatives can come from one field. We have, in other words, assembled the core ingredients of a genuine language: symbols, rules, generative power, and consistency checks. What remains is to understand how this language builds ever more sophisticated structures: phrases, paragraphs, chapters, and eventually the full book of physics. That is the role of the formal grammar hierarchy, which we will explore next. There we will see that not all rules are local. Some are context-dependent. Some are global. Some are like the simple grammar of a child's story. Others are like the deep, nested structure of a complex novel. All of them will live within the same phase-based language you have been learning. For now, you can carry one simple picture with you. Everywhere in the universe, at every point in space and time, there is an invisible jigsaw puzzle of change. Its pieces are the derivatives of phi. Integrability conditions are the quiet, persistent rules that decide whether those pieces can click into one coherent picture, or whether they must be seen as fragments from different puzzles. When they click, you witness unity. When they refuse, you are invited to look deeper, to refine your description, or to accept that more than one story is unfolding. And in either case, you are still listening to the same language. The language of phase and its derivatives. The Holophase language that this entire project is devoted to awakening in you. Salam, and peace be upon you, always.